Three alien cadets stepped off the transport shuttle and into a world they didn't understand yet. Reln carried his duffel bag with two of his forearms while his other limbs hung loose and ready. His exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights of the docking bay. Beside him, Yenna's large eyes adjusted to the brightness, her telepathic senses already reaching out to feel the minds around her. Dorek had to duck through the doorway, his massive frame built for a world where gravity pulled 3 times harder than this station. They had all heard the stories about Earth, whispers in the academy halls back home, warnings from instructors who never explained why they looked nervous when humans were mentioned. The Galactic Coalition had thousands of member species, but only one made veteran soldiers go quiet when their name came up. Exchange students from the outer sectors? A voice cut through the busy docking bay. A human in military uniform walked toward them. Not tall, not particularly muscular. Nothing about him seemed remarkable. His skin was pale, his frame average, and he moved with an easy confidence that didn't match his unremarkable appearance. Commander Hayes, he introduced himself. I'll be your primary instructor for the next cycle. Welcome to Orbital 7. Reln studied the human carefully. Back home, warriors were obvious. They had thick armor plating, natural weapons, size and strength that announced their capability. This human looked soft, vulnerable, weak. Thank you, Commander, Yenna said, her voice musical. She tried to brush his mind gently, a polite greeting among her people. She found something unexpected. The human's thoughts were there, but they sat behind walls, compartments within compartments. It felt wrong somehow. Hayes smiled like he knew exactly what she'd tried to do. Your quarters are in Section 7. Tomorrow morning, 0600 station time, report to Training Hall 3. Get some rest. You'll need it. That night, the 3 aliens shared a meal in the station's dining facility. Around them, dozens of species mixed and talked. Reln watched a group of human cadets at a nearby table. They laughed loudly, shoving each other, acting like younglings rather than soldiers in training. They don't look dangerous, Dorek rumbled, his deep voice barely above a whisper. I could break one with a single hand. Maybe that's why everyone fears them, Yenna suggested. They hide what they are. Or maybe the stories are exaggerated. Reln clicked his mandibles together, the Rannoch's equivalent of a dismissive shrug. Fear grows in the telling. The next morning proved them wrong, though not in ways they expected. Commander Hayes stood before a group of 40 cadets, mixed species, all considered elite warriors from their respective worlds. The training hall stretched wide and tall, filled with equipment designed to push bodies to their limits. Physical assessment, Hayes announced. We start simple. Strength test, Dorek excelled. He lifted weights that made other species struggle. His muscles, built under crushing gravity, handled the challenge easily. Reln's forearms gave him advantages in certain lifts. Even Yenna, from a lower gravity world, managed respectable numbers using telekinetic assistance. The humans performed adequately. Not weak, but nothing special. They lifted, they strained, they succeeded at average levels. Speed trials next, Hayes called out. A Queller cadet blurred through the course, natural reflexes making the obstacles trivial. Reln's species had evolved as ambush hunters, and he completed the run in impressive time. The humans ran it competently. Quick enough, skilled enough, but again, nothing remarkable. By midday, Reln felt confident. These humans were decent soldiers, sure, but the fear surrounding Earth seemed like propaganda. Psychological warfare, perhaps. Make your species seem more dangerous than they are. Then came the afternoon session. A simple exercise, a 50-kilometer march in full combat gear. No breaks except for water, Hayes explained. Standard patrol simulation. You walk until you reach the finish point, Dorek laughed. This is rest day on my world. The march began easily enough. Everyone maintained good pace. The alien cadets chatted among themselves, barely feeling the strain. Around the 20-kilometer mark, Dorek noticed something odd. His legs had started to burn. Not painful yet, but present. He'd expected to feel nothing. At 30 kilometers, Yenna called for a water break. Hayes nodded. 5 minutes. The alien cadets dropped their packs, breathing hard. Reln's exoskeleton felt heavy in a way it never had before. Dorek's powerful legs trembled slightly. Around them, other species showed similar signs of fatigue. The humans sat down, drank water, and stood back up when time was called. They looked tired but functional, The last 20 kilometers became torture. Dorek's world had stronger gravity, yes, but his people were sprinters, built for short bursts of incredible power. This endless, grinding march pushed against everything his evolution had prepared him for. Relm's forearms helped with weight distribution, but his breathing came in ragged gasps. Yenna stumbled twice, her telepathic senses overwhelmed by the exhaustion radiating from every alien around her. The humans just kept walking. Not running, not rushing, just maintaining the same steady pace they'd started with. Their faces showed tiredness. Sweat soaked their uniforms, but their steps never faltered. When Dorek finally crossed the finish line, his legs nearly gave out. He collapsed onto a bench, his massive chest heaving. Around him, alien cadets fell to the ground, gasping, shaking, spent. The humans crossed the line and started stretching. Cool-down exercises like they'd just finished a light jog instead of a 50-kilometer death march. Commander Hayes walked among the exhausted aliens, his face neutral. Good first day. Tomorrow we cover long-distance running, get some food and sleep. Dismissed. That night, Relon lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. His body ached in ways he'd never experienced. Every joint felt inflamed. His muscles screamed. Across the room, Dorek groaned softly, and Yenna's telepathic presence felt dim and exhausted. "They're not stronger than us," Relm said quietly to the darkness. "No," Yenna agreed, her voice barely a whisper, "but they don't stop. We hit our limits and had to push through them. They hit their limits and just kept going like the limits didn't exist." Dorek said nothing for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his deep voice carried something new. Not fear exactly, but respect mixed with confusion. What kind of species evolves to just never stop? None of them had an answer. But as Relm drifted toward sleep, he thought about the stories again. The warnings, the fear. Maybe it wasn't about strength at all. Maybe it was about something else entirely. Something humans had that other species didn't. Outside their quarters, human cadets walked past, heading to their own bunks, laughing and talking about tomorrow's training like today had been nothing at all. Week 2 brought new revelations that made the alien cadets question everything they thought they knew about warfare. The training hall buzzed with activity as Commander Hayes outlined the day's exercise. Sleep deprivation training, 72 hours of continuous operation with minimal rest. Relm felt confident again. His species could enter a form of half-sleep while still functioning. Yenna's people had evolved to rest portions of their brain while other sections remained active. Dorek came from persistence hunters too, though his kind hunted in short, devastating bursts rather than long chases. "You'll be running combat simulations, physical drills and tactical problems," Hayes explained. "Every 6 hours you get a 10-minute break. That's it. Questions?" A Morthani cadet raised one massive hand. "What about actual sleep, sir?" Hayes smiled. It wasn't a comfortable expression. "That's the point. Learning to function when your body wants to shut down. In real combat, the enemy doesn't care if you're tired." The first day went smoothly enough. Everyone performed well despite growing fatigue. Relon noticed the humans seemed to move a bit slower than usual, but they maintained accuracy in their simulations. Nothing concerning. Day 2 changed things. Relm's half-sleep technique started failing. His exoskeleton felt wrong, like it didn't fit properly anymore. His reactions lagged. During a tactical simulation, he made 3 critical errors that would have gotten his entire squad killed in real combat. Across the training hall, other alien species showed similar deterioration. Mistakes piled up. Reaction times slowed to dangerous levels. The humans looked terrible. Dark circles shadowed their eyes. Their skin had taken on an unhealthy pallor. They moved like automated machines, stiff and mechanical. But they didn't make mistakes. Their accuracy remained steady. Their tactical decisions stayed sharp. How? Dorek asked one of the human cadets during a break. The human, a young woman named Rachel, leaned against a wall with her eyes half closed. "How what?" she mumbled. "How are you still functional?" "I can barely think straight," Rachel shrugged. "Honestly, no idea. We just do it. Back in basic training on Earth, they kept us awake for 5 days straight. After a while, your body just accepts it and keeps moving." 5 days? Dorek's voice rose in disbelief. "That should cause permanent damage." "Probably does," Rachel agreed cheerfully. "But we heal." By day 3, Yenna could barely stand. Her telepathic senses had gone haywire, picking up every thought and emotion in the training hall in an overwhelming flood. She couldn't filter anymore, couldn't focus. She completed her simulations through pure determination, but afterwards couldn't remember what she'd done. The humans had gone quiet. They no longer joked or talked. They moved through exercises like ghosts, silent and focused, but they kept moving. Always moving, never stopping. When the 72 hours finally ended, alien cadets collapsed where they stood. Reln's vision blurred. Dorek fell asleep sitting upright. Yenna's mind shut down so completely she didn't even dream. The humans stumbled to their bunks, slept for exactly 8 hours, and showed up for regular training the next morning looking mostly recovered. Commander Hayes used the sleep deprivation exercise as a teaching moment. He brought up historical files during their tactical theory class, projecting images and data onto the large screens at the front of the room. Human military history, he began, is unique in the galaxy for several reasons. First, we fought ourselves for our entire development as a species. The screen showed images of ancient human warfare, swords and shields, then guns and cannons, then aircraft and missiles. The progression was violent and rapid. While most species unified their planets before developing space travel, humans reached the stars while still divided into hundreds of competing nations. We brought our conflicts with us. Relin studied the images with growing unease. Wars that lasted decades, conflicts that killed millions, battles fought in conditions that should have made combat impossible, frozen wastelands, burning deserts, flooded trenches, irradiated ruins. This created a unique problem, Hayes continued. We had to develop tactics not just to defeat alien threats, but to defeat enemies who thought exactly like us. Enemies who knew all our strategies because they'd developed the same ones. A new image appeared. A planet's surface scarred and broken, cities reduced to rubble, forests burned to ash. Total war, Hayes said quietly. The concept that warfare isn't limited to military targets, that everything becomes part of the conflict. Resources, infrastructure, civilian populations. We learned to fight wars where surrender wasn't an option because surrender meant extinction. Yenna felt sick. Her people had conflicts, sure, but they were limited, formal, rules and boundaries that everyone respected. The idea of warfare without limits felt obscene. Humans developed something during these conflicts. Hayes brought up another file. We called it different names throughout history. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric warfare, insurgency. The basic principle is the same. When you cannot win through conventional means, you make the enemy's victory impossible to maintain. The screens showed examples. Small groups ambushing larger forces, traps and deception. Psychological tactics designed to break enemy morale, false surrenders and feigned retreats, fighting that continued years, decades, sometimes centuries after conventional wisdom said the war was over. Dorek raised his hand. This seems dishonorable. Where is the glory in such tactics? Hayes looked at him for a long moment. Glory is for species that can afford it. Humans learned early that survival matters more than honor. A dishonorable victory means you live to see tomorrow. An honorable defeat means you're dead. The classroom fell silent. Around Reln, alien cadets shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how war was supposed to work. War had rules, boundaries, limits. Let me show you something else. Hayes pulled up a new file. Human endurance hunting. Before we developed weapons, our ancestors hunted prey by simply following it until it collapsed from exhaustion. An antelope can outrun a human in a sprint, but humans can jog for hours. Days if necessary, so we'd track prey, push it into running, and follow. Every time it stopped to rest, we'd appear again. Eventually, the prey would collapse from heat exhaustion and shock. Then we'd kill it. The video showed ancient humans doing exactly that, jogging across savannas under brutal sun, following animal tracks, never stopping. The prey animal, faster and stronger, ran and ran until its body simply gave out. This is your evolutionary advantage? Reln asked. Your pursuit predators? We're the only pursuit predators that developed space travel, Hayes corrected. Most predator species are ambush hunters or pack hunters that rely on quick kills. Humans evolved to be the thing that never stops coming. That's in our DNA, in our psychology. Yenna understood now why touching human minds felt so strange. They were built to endure, to push through pain and exhaustion and fear. Their thoughts sat in compartments because they'd learned to function even when part of their mind wanted to shut down. In modern combat, Hayes continued, this translates to something simple. Human forces will continue operations long after other species would have withdrawn to rest and regroup. We'll fight through injuries that would incapacitate most soldiers. We'll maintain combat effectiveness in conditions that make other species non-functional. He pulled up recent engagement reports. Battles where human units had fought for days without relief. Scenarios where retreat was the logical option, but humans had held position through sheer stubbornness. The galaxy fears Earth, Hayes said, because we don't quit. Not because we can't, but because we won't. Every human carries thousands of years of evolutionary programming that says keep moving, keep fighting, keep breathing until the threat is gone or you are. That evening, the 3 alien cadets sat in the observation deck and watched Earth rotate slowly in the distance. The blue and green world looked peaceful from here. Beautiful, even. They hunted animals to death through exhaustion, Doric said quietly. Then they hunted each other the same way. For thousands of years. And they survived it, Yenna added. Not just survived, thrived, built civilizations while constantly at war with themselves. Reln clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The reports from the Galactic Council, the warnings about engaging human forces, I always thought it was exaggeration. It's not, Yenna said with certainty. Her telepathic touch had felt the truth in human minds. They really are like that. All of them. It's not training or discipline. It's what they are. Below them, Earth continued its rotation, serene and beautiful, hiding the violent history that had forged humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. Month 2 began with an announcement that made several alien cadets visibly nervous. Survival training on Training Ground Beta, a moon designated specifically for hostile environment exercises. 2 weeks, minimal supplies, mixed species teams. Commander Hayes assigned groups deliberately, mixing humans with various alien species to force cooperation. Reln found himself grouped with 2 humans, a Queller scout and Doric. The Morthani's massive presence should have made Reln feel secure, but after weeks of watching humans perform impossible feats of endurance, he wasn't sure what to expect anymore. The shuttle dropped them in a dense forest region where the trees grew tall and twisted, their bark covered in thorns. The air tasted wrong, slightly acidic, and the temperature fluctuated wildly between freezing and scorching as the moon rotated through its rapid day-night cycle. Shelter first, announced one of the humans, a young man named Peter. He didn't ask for opinions, just started identifying suitable locations. The other human, an older woman called Ruth, began sorting through their minimal supplies with practiced efficiency. Day 3 brought disaster. Doric went to investigate strange sounds in the underbrush and something attacked. The creature moved faster than seemed possible for its size, all teeth and claws and savage hunger. It caught Doric's arm and tore deep gouges through his thick hide before the team drove it off with their training weapons. Doric collapsed, green blood pumping from the wounds. His breathing came in pained gasps. The injuries were serious but not immediately fatal. On his homeworld, medical assistance would arrive within minutes. Here, they were 3 days from the nearest pickup point. Ruth dropped to her knees beside him and pulled out the basic medical kit. Hold him down, she ordered. Reln and Peter grabbed Doric's other arm while the Queller scout kept watch for more predators. Ruth examined the wounds with cold efficiency, then pulled out a knife. What are you doing? Reln demanded. Field surgery? The wounds are dirty. I need to clean them or infection will kill him before we get back. She heated the knife blade with a small torch until it glowed red. Doric's eyes widened in fear. No, wait for proper medical. Ruth pressed the hot blade against the largest wound. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Doric screamed, his massive body convulsing. Reln had to use all 4 arms to hold him steady. Ruth worked quickly, cutting away damaged tissue, cauterizing smaller blood vessels, cleaning the wounds with antiseptic that made Doric scream again. Through it all, Ruth's hands never shook. Her expression remained calm, focused. She hummed quietly while she worked, some human tune that seemed completely inappropriate for the situation. When she finished, she wrapped the wounds with clean bandaging and gave Doric something for the pain. You'll live, she announced. Try not to be stupid again. That night, Reln watched Ruth eat her rations like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just cut into living flesh with a knife. Like Doric's screams hadn't bothered her at all. How? He asked finally. How what? How can you do that? Cut into him, burn him, and just not care? Ruth looked at him for a long moment. I care, but caring doesn't help him. Doing what needs doing helps him. On Earth, you learn early that squeamishness is a luxury. Sometimes you have to hurt people to save them, By the end of the first week, their food supplies ran critically low. The rations they'd brought were designed to be nutritionally complete but minimal. They were supposed to supplement with local resources, but everything the team had identified as potentially edible had proven toxic to one species or another. Peter returned from scouting with several strange fruits and what looked like a small animal he'd trapped. He laid them out on a flat rock. "These are poisonous," the Queller scout said immediately. "The fruit has alkaloids that cause liver failure. The animal's meat contains neurotoxins." "To you, yeah," Peter agreed. He bit into one of the fruits. "Humans can eat them fine." Realm stared. "You're eating poison?" "Technically, lots of Earth food is poison to other species. Chocolate kills most mammals back home. Caffeine is lethal to some animals in surprisingly small doses. Our livers can process an absurd amount of toxins." He took another bite. "This stuff tastes awful, but it won't kill me." Ruth started cooking the small animal over their fire. "Humans evolved eating partially rotted meat. Our stomachs produce acid strong enough to dissolve metal. We can eat things that would kill most species and we're fine." They offered to share, but no one else could safely consume the local wildlife. The humans ate while the rest of the team watched in fascination and disgust. The second week brought new challenges. The temperature dropped dramatically at night, cold enough that the Queller scout entered a torpor state to conserve energy. Dorek's metabolism slowed dangerously. Even Reln felt his system shutting down, his exoskeleton conducting heat away from his core. The humans started shivering. Violent, uncontrollable shaking that seemed like a malfunction, but they stayed active, gathering wood for the fire, maintaining watch, keeping the shelter secure. Ruth explained through chattering teeth that shivering was their body's way of generating heat. "Inefficient but effective. You're literally vibrating yourselves warm," Reln said in amazement. "Yeah, sucks, honestly, but it works." Peter added more wood to the fire, his hands steady despite the shaking. The final day brought the worst test yet. A pack of the same predators that had injured Dorek found their camp at dawn. 6 of them moving with coordinated intelligence. The team scrambled to defensive positions. Reln fought well, his forearms allowing him to wield multiple weapons. Dorek, still injured but mobile, used his strength to devastating effect. The Queller scouts' natural speed let them dodge attacks that would have killed slower species. But the humans were terrifying. Peter took a slash across his ribs that should have put him down. He didn't even slow, just turned and drove his blade into the creature's throat, his face twisted in rage. Ruth fought with cold precision, targeting weak points, moving like she'd done this 1,000 times before. One of the creatures broke through and knocked Peter to the ground. It raised a clawed limb to finish him. Peter caught the limb with both hands, his arms shaking with effort. The creature was stronger. It should have overpowered him easily. But Peter didn't let go, didn't give up. He held on, screaming with effort, until Ruth put a blade through the creature's skull. When the fight ended, Peter stood up and looked down at his side. The slash had gone deep, blood soaking his uniform. "Huh," he said mildly. "Didn't notice that during the fight." "Didn't notice?" Reln repeated incredulously. "You're bleeding heavily." "Adrenaline," Ruth explained, already moving to treat Peter's wounds. Human fear response floods the body with hormones that increase strength, speed, pain tolerance. We literally get stronger when we're scared or angry. Your fear makes you better at fighting? The Queller scout sounded amazed. Most species freeze or flee when terrified. Humans evolved as both predator and prey, Peter said, wincing as Ruth cleaned his wound. We had to fight and run from things that wanted to eat us. Fear is a weapon for us, not a weakness. The shuttle picked them up on schedule. Dorek needed additional medical treatment, but he'd survived thanks to Ruth's field surgery. The team had lost weight, carried injuries, and looked thoroughly exhausted. But they'd survived 2 weeks in an environment rated as hostile to most known species. Back on Orbital 7, Reln filed his required report on the exercise. He sat at his terminal for a long time, trying to find words to describe what he'd witnessed. Humans eating poison, humans operating through pain that should have incapacitated them, humans getting stronger when they should have been paralyzed with fear. Finally, he wrote something simple. Humans are not like other species. Their biology makes no sense. They eat toxins, ignore injuries, and function in conditions that shut down normal life forms. Recommend continued observation and study. He didn't write what he was really thinking. That humanity had evolved on a world that actively tried to kill them. That every system in their bodies was designed for survival in impossible conditions. That they were walking contradictions who shouldn't exist but somehow thrived. That night, Yenna touched his mind gently, her telepathic presence soft and questioning. She'd felt his thoughts. "They scare you now?" she observed. "Yes," Relin admitted. "Not because they're strong. Because they're unkillable. How do you fight something that refuses to die?" Yenna had no answer. Neither did Dorek, who sat in medical recovery, thinking about the human who'd cut into him without hesitation and saved his life. About the humans who'd fought injured and won. Earth rotated below the station, peaceful and beautiful. None of them looked at it the same way anymore. Month 4 arrived with an exercise that made even the veteran instructors look interested. Large-scale tactical simulation, full combat scenarios, mixed species teams competing against each other in capture-the-flag operations. The simulation would run on a dedicated level of the station converted into varied terrain. Urban environments, forest regions, and open ground. Commander Hayes divided the cadets into attackers and defenders. The alien-heavy teams received the role of attackers, superior numbers, better initial positioning, and access to heavier simulated weapons. The human-led teams were assigned as defenders of a fortified position deep in the simulated territory. Relin commanded one of the attacking forces. His team included Dorek, several Queller scouts, a Morthani fire team, and various other species known for combat prowess. They had numbers, they had strength, and they had every tactical advantage. "This should take 2 days maximum," Dorek predicted, studying the tactical maps. "We have them surrounded, outgunned, and outnumbered 3-1. The simulation began at dawn. Relin's force advanced using standard military doctrine, scouts forward, main force following, heavy weapons and support positions. They moved with coordinated precision exactly as they'd been trained. By midday, they'd lost 6 scouts to traps. Not elaborate traps, just simple pitfalls covered with vegetation. Tripwires connected to simulated explosives, false trails that led into dead ends. Nothing sophisticated but effective. "They're slowing us down," the Queller scout leader reported. "Every 100 meters, we find another obstacle. Push through," Relin ordered. They can't have unlimited resources for traps, but they did. Or at least it seemed that way. The human defenders had disappeared into the terrain like ghosts. Relin's force would advance, find more traps, waste time clearing them, and advance again. Progress became agonizingly slow. Day 2 brought new frustrations. Relin's team started taking casualties from ambushes. Small groups of humans would appear, take shots, and vanish before the superior alien forces could respond. They used the terrain perfectly, attacking from unexpected angles, never staying in one place long enough to be pinned down. "This is dishonorable," one of the Morthani fire team leaders complained. They refused direct combat. "It's effective," Relin corrected, though he felt the same frustration. Every engagement followed the same pattern. The humans would strike, disappear, and reappear somewhere else. They used noise to confuse pursuit, false signals to draw forces out of position, and hit-and-run tactics that made the aliens' superior strength irrelevant. On day 3, Yenna reported something disturbing. The humans were using psychological warfare. They'd set up speakers that played sounds just at the edge of hearing, frequencies that made most species uncomfortable. They'd left disturbing images in places where alien forces would find them. They'd even started mimicking alien communication signals, feeding false information into command networks. "They're in our communications?" Relin demanded. "Not exactly," Yenna explained, her telepathic senses overwhelmed by the chaos. "They're broadcasting on similar frequencies. When our scouts report in, the humans add extra signals that sound legitimate but contain false data. It's making coordination nearly impossible." Relin tried to adapt. He ordered radio silence and switched to visual signals only. The humans adjusted immediately, using the same visual signal patterns to send false orders. When Relin switched to species-specific communication methods, the humans simply disrupted them with random noise. By day 5, Relin's forces technically held superior positions. They'd advanced to within striking distance of the human fortified position. They had the humans surrounded, had numerical superiority, and had better equipment. By every logical measure, they should force a surrender. The humans refused to quit. They continued harassment attacks. They continued psychological operations. They continued making every meter of ground cost time and casualties. Reln studied the tactical display in frustration. He could take the position, but it would cost him 70% casualties and take another week of grinding advance. We're winning, Dorek pointed out. They're trapped, outnumbered, and running low on supplies. Are we? Reln clicked his mandibles in the pattern that meant doubt. We've been fighting for 5 days. In a real war, our supply lines would be stretched. Our forces would be exhausted, and the humans show no signs of surrendering. Commander Hayes called the exercise on day 8. Both sides assembled in the briefing room for after-action analysis. The human teams looked terrible, dirty, exhausted, and sporting various simulated injuries. But they also looked satisfied, almost amused. Hayes brought up the tactical displays showing the 8-day battle. The attacking forces performed admirably. Good coordination, strong tactical decisions, appropriate use of available resources. By day 5, you had achieved a position where victory was mathematically inevitable. He paused, letting that sink in. However, the defenders successfully delayed your advance, inflicted disproportionate casualties, and maintained combat effectiveness throughout the entire exercise. In a real war scenario, this would have allowed reinforcements to arrive, supply lines to be established, or strategic objectives elsewhere to be completed. A Morthani commander stood up, clearly angry. The humans refused honorable combat. They used deception, false signals, psychological manipulation. These tactics are dishonorable. Hayes nodded slowly. They are. They're also effective. Let me show you something. The screens changed to display historical records, human wars stretching back thousands of years. Every conflict showed the same patterns. When faced with superior forces, humans adapted. They used terrain, deception, and psychological warfare. They turned their weaknesses into advantages. The American Revolution. Hayes highlighted one conflict. Colonists fighting the most powerful military on Earth at the time. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, and refused to fight the way their enemy expected. They won. Another file appeared. Vietnam. A small nation fighting a superpower. They used tunnel networks, ambush tactics, and made victory impossible to maintain. The superpower withdrew. More examples followed. Afghanistan, where tribal forces held off modern armies for decades. Urban insurgencies that continued for generations. Resistance movements that never died even after conventional defeat. Humans developed these tactics fighting each other, Hayes explained. For thousands of years, we waged war against enemies who thought exactly like us. This created an arms race of deception, adaptation, and psychological warfare. Every tactic could be countered, so we developed new tactics. Then those were countered, so we adapted again. He pulled up recent Galactic Coalition engagement reports. When humans joined the Coalition military, we brought this entire history with us. We don't fight the way other species fight because we can't afford to. Humans are rarely the strongest, fastest, or toughest species in any engagement, so we fight smarter, dirtier, and more persistently. Reln studied the data with growing understanding. The humans in the exercise had used tactics developed over millennia of constant warfare. They'd treated the simulation like a real fight for survival because that's what they'd been trained to do. You mentioned honor, Hayes continued, looking at the Morthani commander. Many species have codes of honor in warfare, rules about proper combat, limitations on acceptable tactics. Humans had those too once. Then we fought enemies who ignored our rules and killed us anyway. So we learned that honor is a luxury for species that can afford it. Survival comes first, always. The room fell silent. Around Reln, alien cadets processed this information. War wasn't a game for humans. It wasn't about glory or honor or testing strength. It was about winning at any cost, using any method available. Total war, Hayes said quietly. The concept that everything becomes a weapon. Terrain, information, psychology, time itself. When humans fight, we fight with everything we have. We'll use tactics you consider dishonorable. We'll exploit every weakness. We'll turn your strengths into liabilities. He pulled up one final file. Human casualties from historical wars. The numbers were staggering. Millions dead, cities destroyed, entire regions rendered uninhabitable. We know the cost of war. We've paid it over and over. And we learned that the only thing worse than fighting without honor is losing, because you were too honorable to do what was necessary. That evening, Reln found himself in the observation deck again, looking at Earth, the beautiful blue world that had created the most terrifying warriors in the galaxy. Not through superior biology or advanced technology, but through thousands of years of fighting themselves. Yenna joined him, her telepathic presence subdued. I touched one of the human commanders during the exercise, felt their thoughts during combat. They weren't angry or afraid. They were focused, calculating, almost peaceful, like fighting was just another task to complete efficiently. They're apex predators, Dorek rumbled, walking up behind them. Not because they're the strongest. Because they refuse to be prey. They'll use any method, any tactic, any weapon to survive. Realm thought about the exercise. About 8 days of frustration, watching humans turn every advantage against them. The galaxy fears Earth because humans fight like every battle is their last. No rules, no honor, just survival. Yes, Yenna agreed softly. And the terrifying part is they're really good at it. Below them, Earth continued its peaceful rotation, hiding the violent history that had taught humanity how to fight impossible wars and win anyway. Month 6 started like any other training cycle. Routine drills, tactical exercises, physical conditioning. The alien cadets had adapted to human methods, learned to push past their natural limits, and gained grudging respect for humanity's approach to warfare. Then everything changed in a matter of minutes. The zero-gravity combat facility occupied an entire section of Orbital 7's outer ring. Cadets trained there regularly, learning to fight in the vacuum of space where traditional tactics became useless. On this particular day, 40 cadets worked through standard boarding action scenarios when the station's alarm system activated with a harsh, urgent blare. "Hull breach in Section 9, the automated voice announced. "Emergency protocols engaged. All personnel evacuate to safe zones." Reln was halfway through a tactical problem when the section he occupied lost pressure. The air rushed out with a howl that quickly faded to silence. Emergency bulkheads should have sealed automatically. They didn't. The training facility had suffered some kind of massive systems failure. Around him, cadets scrambled for emergency breathing apparatus. Reln's species could survive in vacuum for short periods, his exoskeleton providing limited protection. He grabbed his breather and looked around to assess the situation. 23 cadets in his section, trapped behind failed bulkheads, atmosphere venting into space through a rupture in the outer hull. Dorek pulled himself along a safety cable, his massive frame struggling against the escaping air. Yenna clung to a support beam, her breathing apparatus already in place. The human cadets moved with practiced efficiency, securing their own breathers and checking on those around them. "Everyone to the safe room," shouted Ruth, her voice transmitted through suit communicators. The safe room sat behind a manual bulkhead that should still function even with systems failure. They started moving as a group, but Reln noticed one cadet missing. A young human named Ben had been working in the far corner of the facility when the breach occurred. Reln looked across the chamber and saw him there, separated from the group by a debris field of broken equipment floating in the zero gravity. Ben waved frantically, trying to pull himself forward, but his safety cable had snapped. He floated in the wrong direction, pushed by escaping atmosphere toward the breached section. Worse, his emergency breather hung torn and useless from his suit. He had maybe 60 seconds of air left in his lungs before vacuum exposure killed him. "Leave him," ordered a Queller cadet. "The rescue teams will reach him in time." Ruth looked at the debris field, at Ben floating helplessly toward the breach, at the distance that separated them. "No, they won't. He'll be in hard vacuum in 30 seconds. She moved before anyone could stop her. Grabbed a length of broken cable, wrapped it around her waist, and kicked off toward Ben. Another human, a man named David, immediately followed. So did a human woman called Anna. All three launched themselves into the debris field without hesitation. "They'll die," Dorek said, his voice awed and horrified. "The debris, the vacuum exposure, they don't have proper protective gear." Reln watched in frozen fascination as the three humans navigated the floating wreckage. Ruth took a piece of jagged metal to her shoulder, the impact tearing through her suit. David's leg caught on a twisted support beam, bending at an angle that made Reln wince. Anna made it through the debris field but entered the section where atmosphere had completely vented. She wasn't wearing a full pressure suit. Her emergency breather provided oxygen but no protection from vacuum. Her skin began to redden immediately as the pressure differential affected her body. Blood vessels in her eyes burst, turning the whites crimson. But she kept moving, kept swimming through vacuum toward Ben. Ruth reached him first, blood streaming from her shoulder wound. She grabbed Ben and pushed him toward David, who had created a makeshift tether from equipment cables. Then she pulled off her own breather and shoved it onto Ben's face. "No," Reln transmitted, his voice sharp with shock. "She'll die." Ruth held her breath in hard vacuum. No human could survive that. The moisture in her lungs would boil. The pressure differential would rupture her tissues. She had seconds before catastrophic system failure. But she maintained her grip on Ben, making sure he had the breather secured before she would let David pull them back. The return trip took 90 seconds. 90 seconds of exposure that should have killed all three humans. Ruth's lips had gone blue, her face swollen. David's leg hung useless, clearly broken. Anna's exposed skin showed severe barotrauma, blood seeping from her pores. They pulled Ben into the safe room and Ruth collapsed immediately. Medical training kicked in automatically among the gathered cadets. They got Ruth breathing again, stabilized David's leg, and treated Anna's vacuum exposure. Ben gasped and coughed, but lived. When rescue teams finally cut through the jammed bulkheads 20 minutes later, they found all four humans alive. Ruth had suffered severe decompression trauma, burst blood vessels throughout her body, and frostbite on her exposed hands. David's broken leg required surgery. Anna had tissue damage across 30% of her body surface. They all survived. Within hours, they were conscious and talking. Within days, they were recovering. Within weeks, the medical staff cleared them for light duty. Reln visited Ruth in the medical bay. She sat propped up in bed, bandages covering most of her upper body, looking tired but alive. "Why?" he asked simply. Ruth looked at him with those disturbingly calm human eyes. "Why what? Why risk your life for one cadet?" The logical decision was to save the majority and accept the loss of one. "Because he's one of us," Ruth said, like it was the most obvious thing in the universe. "You don't leave people behind." "That's not logic, that's just how humans are. But you took off your breather. You exposed yourself to hard vacuum. You should have died." Ruth shrugged, then winced at the pain the movement caused. "Yeah, probably should have. But the human body is tougher than people think. I've read accounts of people surviving explosive decompression for up to 2 minutes. I figured I had enough time if I moved fast. That's insane. Maybe. But Ben's alive, so I'd do it again." That night, Reln accessed the station's medical database. He pulled up files on human physiology, looking for explanations. What he found disturbed him more than the vacuum rescue. Humans had survived impossible trauma throughout their history. Cases of people walking away from accidents that should have killed them instantly. Individuals who'd survived being frozen, drowned, crushed, burned, stabbed, shot, and exposed to lethal radiation. The human body had redundant systems, incredible healing capacity, and a stubborn refusal to die when it logically should. One file particularly caught his attention. A human who'd survived clinical death, heart stopped, brain activity ceased for over an hour before being revived with full recovery. Another who'd been impaled through the torso by a metal rod, walked to get help and survived surgery. A third who'd lost over half their blood volume and still maintained consciousness long enough to radio for help. Yenna joined him at the terminal, her telepathic presence curious. She read over his shoulder. "Their survival instinct overrides logic," she observed. "I felt it when I touched Ruth's mind during the rescue. She knew she might die. The knowledge was there, clear and acknowledged. But she moved anyway because saving Ben mattered more than her own survival." "That makes no sense evolutionarily," Reln argued. "Individual survival should be paramount." "Not for pack species," Dorek rumbled, walking up behind them. His injuries from the survival exercise had long since healed. "Some species evolved to protect the group over the individual. But humans take it to an extreme." They pulled up Earth's history files again, this time focusing not on warfare but on human behavior in crises. The examples were endless. Humans running into burning buildings to save strangers. Humans donating organs to people they'd never met. Humans risking everything to protect others. More than that, humans had survived as a species through cooperation. They'd faced ice ages, supervolcanoes, pandemics, and near-extinction events. Every time they'd survived by working together, by refusing to abandon their group even when logic said they should. What kind of death world creates this? Yenna wondered aloud. Reln pulled up Earth's geological and climate history. The data made his mandibles click in disbelief. Earth had suffered at least 5 major extinction events. Supervolcanoes that blocked out the sun for years. Ice ages that covered most of the planet. Asteroid impacts that wiped out the dominant species. Humanity's evolutionary ancestors had survived through all of it, not because they were strong or fast or naturally adapted, but because they helped each other, because they refused to leave anyone behind, because they'd learned that individual survival meant nothing if the species died out. They're not warriors, Yenna said softly. They're survivors. Every human carries the genetic memory of near extinction, of watching their world try to kill them and refusing to die. That's why they run into vacuum to save one person. That's why they fight impossible wars. That's why they never quit. Dorek pulled up comparative data on other spacefaring species. Every one of them had evolved on relatively stable worlds, planets where catastrophic change happened on geological timescales, so slowly that evolution could keep pace. Species that had never faced sudden, species-threatening extinction. Earth tried to kill humanity repeatedly, Dorek said. And humanity survived by being unkillable, by adapting faster than the planet could destroy them, by refusing to accept extinction. Relon thought about Ruth calmly taking off her breather in hard vacuum, about the 3 humans who'd launched themselves into danger without hesitation, about months of watching humans push past pain, exhaustion, fear, and logic to achieve impossible things. The galaxy fears Earth, he said slowly, because humans are the species that survive the unsurvivable. They carry that survival instinct in every cell. When faced with death, they don't freeze or flee. They fight. They adapt. They refuse to quit. And they'll risk everything to save their own, Yenna added. Even one individual matters enough to die for. On the screens, Earth rotated peacefully. Beautiful, deadly, the death world that had forged humanity in fires that would have destroyed any other species. The planet that created the most dangerous, most resilient, most stubbornly unkillable species the galaxy had ever encountered, and humanity had survived it all. The final month of the exchange program arrived with a strange mixture of anticipation and melancholy. Relon, Yenna, and Dorek had changed in ways they hadn't expected. They'd arrived thinking humans were unremarkable, perhaps overrated. They would leave with a perspective that would alter their understanding of warfare, survival, and what it meant to refuse defeat. The graduation exercise combined everything they'd learned. A multi-day simulation defending a colony world from theoretical invasion, mixed species teams working together, using their combined strengths to achieve objectives. The alien cadets and human cadets had become something resembling actual military units, understanding each other's capabilities and limitations. The exercise went better than anyone expected. Relon's tactical planning combined with human persistence hunting techniques to create pursuit patterns that trapped enemy forces. Dorek's raw strength combined with human pain tolerance to hold positions that should have been overrun. Yenna's telepathic coordination combined with human deceptive tactics to create information warfare that confused the opposing force completely. When the scores posted, their combined team had achieved the highest rating in the Academy's history, not because any one species was superior, but because they'd learned to work together, to blend their different evolutionary advantages into something greater than the sum of its parts. The evening before graduation, an informal gathering formed in the observation deck. No officers, no instructors, just cadets who'd survived 6 months of the most intense training in the galaxy. Someone had smuggled in alcohol from 3 different worlds, and species mixed freely, sharing stories and laughter. Relon found himself sitting with Commander Hayes, watching Earth rotate slowly below. The human officer had shed his usual stern demeanor, looking relaxed and almost approachable. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Relon ventured. Hayes nodded. "Sure. Why is Earth feared? I've watched humans for 6 months. I understand the endurance, the pain tolerance, the refusal to quit. But other species have advantages too. Why does humanity's reputation seem so much more severe?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Because we survived ourselves," he said finally. "Every other species in the Galactic Coalition unified their planet before developing weapons of mass destruction. You all had wars, sure, but you resolved your differences before you could annihilate yourselves." He pulled up a file on his personal datapad. Images appeared showing mushroom clouds, burning cities, radiation-scarred landscapes. Humans developed nuclear weapons in 1945. We had the capability to render our entire planet uninhabitable, and we came within minutes of doing exactly that multiple times. Relon studied the images with growing horror. "You nearly made yourselves extinct?" "Several times. We had political crises where one wrong decision, one miscommunication, one person refusing to follow orders would have triggered total nuclear war. Entire generations grew up knowing that civilization could end tomorrow, that humanity might not survive its own innovations. But you didn't destroy yourselves. No, we chose cooperation instead. But it was a choice, not an inevitability. And the galaxy knows that about us. Knows that humans had the power to end the world and decided not to use it. That makes us unpredictable. Yenna drifted over, her telepathic senses drawn by the serious conversation. Any species that survives its own worst nature is dangerous. Not because of what they'll do, but because you can never be certain they won't do it again. Hayes nodded. Exactly. Plus, our history of constant warfare created something unique. Humans had thousands of years to develop tactical thinking, strategy, and weapons innovation. We fought each other with everything from stones to nuclear missiles. We learned to fight in every environment against every type of enemy, using every possible advantage. Dorek joined them, carrying drinks for everyone. And when humans joined the Galactic Coalition, you brought all that experience with you. Right. Most species have military traditions going back maybe a few hundred years. Some don't have military traditions at all, just defensive forces. Humans have been waging war for our entire recorded history. We're really good at it because we've had so much practice. Relon accepted the drink Dorek offered, some human beverage that smelled vaguely toxic, but it's more than just experience. I've seen humans do impossible things, survive injuries that should kill them, fight through exhaustion that would incapacitate other species, risk their lives for strangers without hesitation. Deathworld biology, Hayes agreed. Earth is classified as a Class 9 deathworld. That's rare. Most spacefaring species evolved on Class 3 or 4 worlds. Stable climates, limited natural disasters, predictable environments. Earth threw everything at humanity. Ice ages, volcanoes, pandemics, predators, toxic plants. Climate shifts that happened in generations rather than millennia. He pulled up Earth's evolutionary history, showing the near-extinction events that had shaped humanity. Every one of these should have wiped us out. And each time we survived by being more adaptable, more cooperative, more stubborn than the disaster trying to kill us. That survival instinct is coded into our DNA now. Every human inherits it. Yenna touched Hayes' mind gently, with permission this time. She felt what she'd sensed in every human she'd encountered. That strange contradiction of fear and hope, aggression and compassion, violence and love. You carry your death world inside you, she said softly. The knowledge that survival isn't guaranteed, that everything can end tomorrow, but also the determination that it won't end without a fight. Pretty much, Hayes agreed. Makes us intense to be around, I know. But it's also what makes humans valuable in the coalition military. We don't quit. We don't surrender when logic says we should. We fight until we win or until we're dead. And sometimes we keep fighting after that. I saw historical accounts, Dorek rumbled. Humans who continued resistance movements for decades after their nations fell. Soldiers who fought impossible battles because retreating wasn't an option. Civilians who survived in conditions that should have killed them just through stubbornness. Hayes smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Yeah, that's humanity. We're the species that looked at a universe that wanted us dead and said, no thanks, we'll live anyway. It's not always a good trait. Makes us hard to deal with sometimes. But it also means you can count on humans to never give up on you. The conversation drifted to other topics as more cadets joined them. Stories from the training cycles, jokes about cultural differences, plans for the future. But Relon kept thinking about what Hayes had said, about humanity choosing cooperation even when they had the power to destroy themselves, about surviving death worlds and near extinction, and bringing all that experience to the stars. The next day, graduation ceremonies filled the main assembly hall with cadets from across the galaxy. Species Relon had never seen before mixed with familiar faces. The Galactic Coalition's military academy graduated thousands of officers every cycle, sending them out to protect Coalition space and maintain peace among the stars. When Relon's name was called, he walked across the stage and received his commission with pride. He'd earned it through 6 months of the hardest training he'd ever experienced. Beside him, Dorek and Yenna received their own commissions, representatives of their respective species' militaries. The human cadets graduated with quiet dignity, no excessive celebration, just satisfaction at completing their training. Reln noticed that several of them, including Ruth, still carried scars from the vacuum incident. The humans wore those scars without shame, marks of survival rather than failure. After the ceremony, Realm prepared to leave Orbital 7 and return to his homeworld. He would carry recommendations from Commander Hayes, certifications in advanced tactical operations, and skills that would make him valuable to the Rannox military. But more than that, he carried understanding. He found Hayes one final time before boarding his transport. "I need to file a final report for my government about the exchange program and what I learned. What should I tell them about Earth?" Hayes considered the question seriously. "Tell them the truth, that humans are dangerous, but not because we're conquerors. We're dangerous because we're survivors who refuse to be defeated. Tell them that Earth is a valuable ally because humans will fight for their friends with the same stubbornness we fought our own extinction. Tell them that humanity can be trusted to never quit, never surrender, and never abandon those who stand with us. And if my government asks whether they should fear Earth, tell them yes, but tell them to fear us the way you fear a loyal guard animal. Dangerous, yes. Unpredictable sometimes, but absolutely committed to protecting what we consider ours. The coalition is ours now. We'll defend it with everything we have." Realm clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. He boarded his transport and watched through the viewport as Orbital 7 shrank into the distance. Below it, Earth continued its eternal rotation, the blue and green deathworld that had forged humanity in fires that would have destroyed any other species. Weeks later, back on his homeworld, Realm filed his official report. He kept it factual and precise, detailing human capabilities without excessive emotion, but his conclusion carried weight that his superiors would understand. Recommendation: alliance with Earth should be maintained at all costs. Humans possess unique capabilities derived from deathworld evolution and constant historical conflict. They demonstrate superior endurance, pain tolerance, adaptability, and tactical innovation. More critically, humans display pack-bonding behaviors that make them exceptionally loyal allies and absolutely committed to mutual defense. As enemies, humans would be manageable through superior numbers or technology. As enemies who refuse to accept defeat and will fight indefinitely using any available method, they would be extremely costly to engage. As allies, they represent the most reliable military partnership available in the coalition. Human forces will not retreat, will not surrender, and will continue operations long after other species would consider a situation hopeless. The human species evolved on a planet that actively tried to kill them, and survived through cooperation, adaptability, and refusal to accept extinction. This evolutionary pressure created a species uniquely suited to military operations, requiring extended endurance, creative tactical thinking, and absolute commitment to objectives. Further recommendation: exchange programs with Earth should continue and expand. Human training methods, while intense, produce superior results when combined with species-specific advantages. Mixed units of human and non-human personnel demonstrate capabilities exceeding homogeneous force projections. Final note: in a galaxy of specialist species, each evolved for specific environments and challenges, humans are the ultimate generalists. They are not the strongest, fastest, smartest, or most naturally armed species, but they are the only species that evolved fighting for survival every single day, in every possible environment, against every imaginable threat. This makes them invaluable as allies and extremely dangerous as enemies. The galaxy does not fear Earth because humans are superior. The galaxy fears Earth because humans are unkillable, and they proved it by surviving their own death world and themselves. Realm sent the report and looked up at his homeworld's night sky. Somewhere out there, Earth rotated peacefully around its star, home to the species that had changed his understanding of warfare, survival, and what it meant to never give up. He understood now why the veterans went quiet when humans were mentioned. Not from fear of human violence, but from respect for human resilience, from understanding that humanity had earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through sheer stubborn refusal to die when the universe demanded it. And that made all the difference.